Okay, we're all three here. Ryan, Kenny, are we okay? Good to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we are recording, correct? Yes, we are. Okay. Good morning, everybody. The time is 10:01. I'll call the July 13th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined by our Vice Chair, Dorothy Bailey.
Morning.
We have Commissioner Giraldo with us as well.
Good morning.
And I am Chair Shapiro. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with a link provided in the email provided by the planning board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see referenced on the screen before you. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by our principal counsel, David Warner. We have Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator, and Joe Parsons, senior technical hearing writer, as well as Rhonda Ford, technical hearing writer. We're also joined by James Hunt, our division chief for the Development Review Division, and we have staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Crowner helping us with technology behind the scenes, as always, quite ably. So with that, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda. This is a motion to approve a resolution of support for Parks and Rec Month and Parks and Rec Professionals Day. We'd look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to just comment that I had the opportunity and the pleasure of attending this past Saturday, the opening of the Fort Washington Dog Park. And I just wanted to thank all of the staff involved in a very successful event.
Thank you very much for that. And also under discussion, I'd like to point out that if you haven't seen the news, we had a great bit of exciting national, almost international news at our dinosaur park, where some very significant findings were unearthed. I can't mention the name of the bone, the animal that they think the bone is from, but it's a 115 million year old dinosaur,
Right.
The bones that were found. And so it's just another exciting thing and another example of how our wonderful, wonderful Parks and Rec folks and the variety of things that they do that are just so wonderful for the community and significant even nationally and internationally. So with that, we've got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it, 3-0. Next item, I'd look for a motion to approve the draft minutes from June 29, 2023.
Motion to approve draft minutes.
Second.
A motion and a second. Motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it, 3-0. Next items on our agenda are to discuss legislation. These are items 3A1 and 3A2. We'll start with 3A1, CB 70, 2023, and start with Ms. Hightower. Ms. Hightower, are you with us? There she is. We can't hear you. You want to take a second on that, Raina, and we'll switch to CB 6823? Okay. All right. Chad, are you available?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, so let's move on to item 3A2 on our agenda, CB 68 2023. And Mr. Williams will be presenting. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board and members of the public. My name is Chad Williams, for the record, Master Planner with the Countywide Planning Division. Excuse me. CB 68 2023 is a bill that would attempt to prohibit the construction of multifamily residential dwellings in our RMF 48 or residential multifamily 48 zone on land under 6 acres in size and with a future land use recommendation for recreational uses. This is a site-specific legislative zoning amendment. We understand that a single property located at 2300 Brinkley Road, generally across Brinkley Road from the Rosecroft racetrack area, was the intended subject of this bill. However, this bill is so narrowly tailored that this location does not qualify, and staff have been unable to identify a single property in Prince George's County that would qualify for CB 68. We recommend that in light of the planning department's recommendations and the planning board's actions on generally opposing site-specific legislative zoning amendments because they really go against the uniformity and consistent treatment of properties that are core purposes of any zoning ordinance, and that any site-specific laws that may burden specific or individual property owners or benefit property owners may violate state constitutions against special laws, that we recommend opposition on that basis. It also seems unusual from a planning perspective to restrict or prohibit multifamily development on the highest density residential multifamily zone in the county designed for multifamily purposes. And we believe that a better alternative than a potential legislative amendment, should the council wish to restrict multifamily on any given property or multiple properties, may be through a minor plan amendment and concurrent sectional map amendment process. There are some technical comments in our staff report. I won't get into detail on that in this discussion, should the council choose to move forward with some variant of this bill. But just to close out, while we understand that this bill is intended for a single property and that property doesn't qualify, one of the major reasons that we were able to do that is the recommendation of recreational land uses on the subject property. We reviewed all 38 of the adopted and in effect master plans and sector plans in the county, only 2 of which contain a recreational land use, and neither one of those 2 have any RMF 48 property in the county. So for all these reasons, staff recommend that the planning board vote to oppose CB 68 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Commissioners, I think staff's rationale is as clear as could be, and I don't have any concerns with following staff's recommendations, but let me open it up for any kind of discussion or questions that you may have for staff. Chair Bailey or Commissioner Giraldo.
I have none. I
No questions.
support the staff's position.
Okay, all right, sounds good. There's no other discussion on this, and I would look for a motion.
Motion to oppose CB 68, and as indicated by Mr. Williams, for those reasons as indicated by Mr. Williams, to oppose CB 68.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Bailey to adopt staff's recommendation to oppose. Second by Commissioner Giraldo. No further discussion on the motion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Great, thank you.
And now we'll go back to Ms. Hightower. Do we have you? Don't think we do. We can either come back to that or Mr. Berlage, are you on the line by a chance? Or Mr. Williams, can you take this up?
Yes, sir. I could take this up. Give me just one moment to adjust my screen here.
And Ms. Hightower, and now I see you.
She is on now.
With some support in the background. Always good to see. Mr. Williams, give it a second. Maybe Ms. Hightower can make this work.
Sure.
All right, let's switch to you, Mr. Williams.
Okay. again, for the record, Chad Williams with the Countywide Planning Division. CB 70 2023 is a bill that would propose some additional requirements for cannabis use in what turned out to be the former RA, RE, RL, RR, RS, and R55 zones. It would specifically be looking to adjust the codified requirements for medical cannabis dispensaries that are already in the prior zoning ordinance and a new zoning ordinance in an apparent attempt to limit dispensaries to the IH or industrial heavy zone in the current zoning ordinance and have medical cannabis. Actually, it would remove the qualifier medical, so it would be cannabis dispensaries for both medical or recreational cannabis to be at least 2,500 feet from those former residential zones. Any land owned by the Park and Planning Commission, daycare centers for children or recreational programs, before and after school uses, and any school land uses. And it would also add some regulations that would prohibit on-site consumption, hours of operation regulations, and it requires any existing cannabis dispensary use to comply with these proposed regulations within 24 months or be subject to civil fines. This bill has been a subject of some recent local media articles, including in the Washington Post and WTOP. So it seems to be a very time-sensitive and timely matter that the council is attempting to deal with. However, staff have numerous concerns with the bill as drafted, starting with, and most importantly, it's attempting to amend the prior zoning ordinance, which no longer exists. It is not possible to amend the prior zoning ordinance. The regulations of prior zoning ordinance only exist to the extent that they filter through as authorized by the current ordinance. So any desires by the council to revise regulations that may apply to anybody who's wishing to take advantage of the regulations of the prior ordinance need to work through the mechanism of the current ordinance to get at those regulations. The bill has some other concerns, and please bear with me because I think that they're important to go over. It does look to add the limitation to the IH zone. Again, we're working with a bill that's looking at the prior ordinance. The IH or industrial heavy zone does not exist in the prior ordinance. It's a creation of the new ordinance and is only present in the new ordinance. Neither the former I2 zone nor the current IH zone even permit medical or cannabis, recreational cannabis dispensaries. And this bill is missing any use tables where such a use would need to be authorized. So if there's an attempt to proceed with this this particular piece of legislation, there would need to be the addition of use tables to clarify.
Ms. Williams, Ms. Hightower, I think we can hear you now, but Mr. Williams is running through it. So hear what he's saying, jump in if you need to, and keep going, Chad.
Okay, thank you, sir. So a bill would need to include the use tables to even permit this zone in the industrial heavy and permit this use in the industrial heavy zone, because otherwise the bill would seem to have no effect on what the council wishes to do with the regulations. It's also equally important, particularly for enforcement purposes, to define recreational cannabis dispensary or any recreational cannabis uses. And this bill does not include definitions for that. Medical cannabis had five defined uses in the prior ordinance, 4 defined uses in the current ordinance, but there is nothing on recreational cannabis. And this bill seems to suggest that the desire is just to pull back from the specifics of medical or recreational and just call it cannabis. You would still need to amend those definitions accordingly to address those issues. So at minimum, if the council wishes to incorporate any laws pertaining to recreational cannabis in a zoning ordinance, uses and definitions do need to be addressed in our opinion. There are some regulations I mentioned about giving cannabis dispensaries 24 months to come into compliance with the new regulations. They're located on page 2, lines 18 through 20 on CB 70. This is really transition language. It's not regulatory standards. And we believe that that's transition language should be located in the transitional provisions in Part 27.1 of the ordinance, because it's all too easy for a 2-year transition period in the standards to be lost. People are only looking at the standards when there's a permit for a new use and occupancy, or there's a code enforcement action underway. So it's just easier for all parties to have this in a transition provision so that they're visible and readily understood to all parties. On page 2, line 21 of this bill, there is some language that is an incomplete sentence that refers to special exceptions. We honestly don't understand what this statement is intended to do because it's incomplete. It looks like it may also be conflating special exceptions with departures and variances, because it's looking to seemingly say that a special exception to depart or waive or provide relief from some standards may not be approved. But that's not really the purpose of special exceptions. That's more the purpose of variances and departures. Again, on page 2, lines 22 to 24, there's some language that indicates that cannabis dispensaries that do not comply with the regulations of this bill after that 2-year period would be subject to certain enforcement actions in terms of fees until they come into compliance. This is most appropriate in Part 27, subtitle 28 of the zoning ordinance rather than subtitle 27, the county code. I am mixing up my language because I'm going too fast, so please forgive me. To clarify that statement, enforcement elements are most appropriate in subtitle 28 of the county code, not in subtitle 27 in the zoning ordinance, unless they have to be zoning related. And this would be more of an operational enforcement issue. And finally, and to wrap up, rather than pursue CB 70, if it's the council's desire to begin to address recreational cannabis, and it's certainly an understandable desire because it is legal in the state of Maryland, as you all know, and it's something that does need to be addressed, staff recommend that a omnibus bill that comprehensively addresses growing, processing, sale, and use of recreational cannabis in the county be drafted. And we stand, as always, more than willing to work with the county council to achieve their policy goals for that and their legislative goals. We did try to look at the applicability of this bill in terms of the number of properties in the county. It turned out to be impossible to figure that out. Primarily, the residential zones that are listed no longer are applied to any land in the county. And some of the locational standards, such as proximity to recreational programs and before and after school programs, are very challenging to map because we don't necessarily know where all of those are located, and they change locations or they change operation all the time. So for these numerous reasons, staff recommend that CB 70, that the planning board just oppose this bill. In the format that appeared, it would be extremely challenging to modify it into a revised draft and move that forward successfully.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Williams, and thank you, Ms. Hightower. Dare I say, Ms. Hightower, we can't hear you.
I just want to.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Ms. Hightower, go ahead.
I just want to say I apologize, Planning Board, and thank you, Chad Williams, for stepping in for me. I appreciate it. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you, and it's always a team effort, so life is good.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Warner?
Thank you, Chair Shapiro. David Warner, Principal Counsel. I just wanted to add a little bit additional information to Chad's analysis. When this bill came to us for review, legal realized that it's timely to evaluate the new state law comprehensively. And as Chad suggested, it was our recommendation that all aspects of recreational marijuana, from the growing to the use of it, be addressed in an omnibus bill. But we did start our research into that this week. And in addition to the issues that Chad mentioned, we've also identified areas of this bill that conflict with state law and may not be permissible. So that's an additional reason that we would recommend opposing the bill. And then obviously supporting our involvement in drafting of any bill. We certainly would join in that effort as well if requested. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Commissioners, you've heard from staff, you've heard from council. I think they put a lot of good work into analyzing the bills before us. I think their rationale for opposing it is crystal clear. Any comments, questions, discussion?
Nope.
No questions. I want to thank Mr. Williams for his thorough review of the proposed bill, and I certainly do support it.
Thank you. All right, if there's no further discussion, then I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, go ahead, Vice Chair.
I move that we accept Mr. Williams' recommendations and we oppose CB 70 2023 as written.
Second.
Got a motion, a second to support staff's recommendation to oppose. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey?
But aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Hightower. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Mr. Warner.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Before I look for a motion to approve the consent agenda, we're going to have one item removed from the consent agenda at the request of staff. So under 4B, draft resolution 2023-79 will be taken off the consent agenda. We're not going to be taking that up in regular session. That'll just be for consideration at a future date. So I would so the motion would be to approve the consent agenda accepting without 2023-79. And is there anyone who wishes to oppose staff's recommendations? Any board member or anyone from the public? If not, then I would look for a motion.
After consideration of the records for item number 4A, I move adoption of the staff findings and approval of this item on the consent agenda in accordance with the recommendation of staff.
Second.
Thank you. And hopefully a friendly amendment to the motion maker. It's 4A and 4B, but under 4B without 2023-79.
Yes.
Okay. That's acceptable to seconder as well. So we've got a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. No discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey?
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo?
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you all. We'll now move to our regular agenda items. The order that we're going to be taking these up is we'll first start with item 9, and then we'll go through the regular order. So we're going to do items 9, then 5, 6, 7, 8. Item 9 is a comprehensive design plan CDP 0301-01 Kenwood Village. This item was continued from June 29, 2023 planning board meeting. We have Mr. Haller, who's representing the applicant, and we have Mr. Shelley who will give the staff presentation. This is an evidentiary hearing, so I'll be requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. Though at this point, I don't think we're going to have any testimony, if anyone, besides the attorney for the applicant. So if anyone does need to come forward, Mr. Haller, I can swear him in at that time. I assume that's okay with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, let me turn to staff first. Mr. Shelley, good morning and take it away.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair. Are you able to hear me okay?
We can hear you
Yes.
fine.
All right, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design Section. Item number 9 is Comprehensive Design Plan CDP-0303-01 for Kenwood Village, which seeks to develop 124 single-family detached residential dwelling units. This case was continued for 2 weeks from the June 29, 2023 Planning Board hearing to allow the applicant to work with staff on reviewing the prior comprehensive design plan conditions of approval. The applicant provided a 45-day extension to the action limit, which now expires on September 19, 2023, as shown in Applicant Exhibit 1. As a matter of housekeeping, the applicant has provided a revised conditions memorandum titled Applicant Exhibit 2 prior to the hearing deadline on June 11, 2023. Staff is in agreement with the revised conditions provided in the exhibit and could discuss further if a planning board member has questions. Staff has provided a revised findings memorandum titled Staff Exhibit 1, which is agreed upon by staff and the applicant. Staff also note that condition 3 of the previously approved zoning map amendments was not analyzed in the staff report. However, this condition was analyzed by the applicant on page 13 of the backup, and staff concurs with the analysis as it will be further evaluated at the time of building permit approval. An analysis of the condition will also be included in the published resolution. Based on evaluation and analysis, urban design staff recommend that the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve comprehensive design plan CDP-0303-01 and type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-017-04-03, subject to the recommended conditions of approval within the technical staff report, further modified by the revised conditions provided by the applicant and agreed upon by staff in applicant exhibit 2, along with the revised findings provided by staff and agreed upon by the applicant in staff exhibit 1. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, any questions for staff? No questions, and we will. And by the way, I see Mr. Brown, our People's Zoning Council's on. Mr. Brown, good to see you.
Yes, good morning. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn to Mr. Haller. Take it away.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. It is my pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Thomas Haller. I'm an attorney with offices in Largo, and I'm here today representing the applicant in this Comprehensive Design Plan BHC Inc. We do have several representatives of our team that are here today to answer any questions that you might have. Mr. Joe Stroyeski with Mid-Atlantic Homes, Mr. Phil Hughes, and Ms. Sally Stewart with CPJ, who are our engineers. I do want to start by thanking Mr. Shelley for his work in preparing the staff report. This property does have a bit of a history, and so there were a lot of documents that needed to be sifted through, which is really why we had the 2-week continuance. But I want to thank him for his availability and working with us on reviewing and the minor modifications to the conditions which have been presented to you. I would note that we do agree with staff's recommendation and the modified conditions as set forth in the applicant's proposed revisions to conditions in applicant's exhibit 2, and support the staff's recommendation with those revised conditions. I do want to provide a bit of brief background about not only the property but also the applicant, just because of the history of this. As is noted in the staff report, this project dates back to a rezoning that actually occurred in 1992, over 30 years ago. That's when the property was actually placed in comprehensive design zone in the RS zone. And while the property did proceed through the approval process, it took several years for that to occur. Even though the property was zoned in 1992, it was not subject to an SDP until 2013. But the property has never developed. And when it was originally platted, it was platted for a total of 72 lots. BHC Inc. got involved with the property back in 2022 and filed a basic plan amendment. And the primary purpose of the basic plan amendment was to reduce the minimum lot size that was established in the original conditions to 4,200 square feet to allow them to design and introduce a new single-family detached home product in the county. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background about that because BHC Inc., which is the applicant, is an affiliated entity with Mid-Atlantic Homes. And I think many of the planning board members are familiar with Mid-Atlantic Homes. They have been building homes in Prince George's County for about 35 years. Prince George's County has been their home for building communities. And quite frankly, they've built some of the finest residential communities in the county. I'm sure that many of the commissioners are familiar with some of their projects. They've done several in the 450 corridor, such as Silverbrook, which was their first project back in 1988. And then, and you would also be familiar with Lakeview. One of the distinguishing characteristics of Mid-Atlantic Homes is their amazing entrance features. They really put a lot of effort into creating a sense of community and designing entrance features. Two that might be most notable that the planning board members may be familiar with water feature at the entrance to the Woodmore North subdivision on Route 450. And another one is at the Villages of Savannah, which is in Brandywine. And one of the features that really distinguishes Mid-Atlantic Homes from many of the other builders is the creativity in their home designs. Over the years, they spend a lot of time listening to their buyers, and they design homes that are responsive to the buyer's requests. I mentioned a few minutes ago the Villages of Savannah in Brandywine. That is an example of what Mid-Atlantic does in response to their buyers' requests. Villages of Savannah was a large project on Brandywine Road, and after they built the first phase of the project, they held focus groups with the purchasers and discussed with them what they would like to see or what they would be interested in future home designs. And the theme that kept coming back to them was multi-generational homes and single floor living. And so Mid-Atlantic designed homes that were multi-generational in nature with 2 primary suites, with first floor primary suites, and with single story homes to be able to be responsive to those desires. And as the council knows, the planning board knows, there has been a real push toward multi-generational homes nationally as well as regionally. And Villages of Savannah ended up becoming a great example of a successful community because of the way that Mid-Atlantic Homes responded to the buyer's concerns. That type of communication with their buyers has kind of led them to the Kenwood Village project. Mid-Atlantic has built several homes in the Westphalia community, including a wider 30-foot wide townhouse. And while they only built a few of those homes, the feedback that they got was that homeowners love the idea of a home that lives as a single family detached home that's bigger, but has the maintenance in terms of yard space of a townhouse. And so what they have done is to design a product that's narrow and deep as opposed to wide and squat. And that was the inspiration for Kenwood Village. Kenwood Village, as is noted, is a comprehensive design plan, and the comprehensive design zones provide the flexibility that they needed to be able to design this type of product. And so the homes that they have designed for this community will be 30 feet in width, 60 feet in depth, and they are not intended to be starter homes. These are move-up lifestyle homes for people that want the space of a single-family detached home, but do not want all the maintenance responsibilities that go along with a big yard. We will be back to you, obviously, with a specific design plan, and they are working on finalizing the home designs now. In fact, they're getting ready to engage in focus groups with residents, and we met with the Largo Civic Association as well to present their early concept designs in order to create this product, which they are very excited to present to the planning board. But we did submit in the record of the zoning hearing examiner the interior floor layouts for these homes and some concept architecture. That exhibit is referenced as Exhibit 47 in the record of the zoning hearing examiner when this case went through the basic plan amendment process. And we would request the planning board take administrative notice of those plans. But I would note that all of the homes that are proposed in this development will have a minimum of 4 to 5 bedrooms, a minimum of 2.5 baths, 2-car garages, and as I said, will be the goal for Mid-Atlantic is to provide a product that is less expensive than a large single-family home on a large lot, but it will be more expensive than a traditional townhouse that you would see in Prince George's County. So this is an opportunity to provide a product that doesn't exist. Mid-Atlantic is masterful at designing these types of products and is working closely with their focus groups in order to make sure that they deliver something that is not only desired by the future buyers, but also blends well and is compatible with the surrounding community. So I have, as I mentioned before, Mr. Stroyevsky with Mid-Atlantic is also here if you would like for him to answer any questions, he would be happy to do so and be happy to be sworn in. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to the proposed development.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Haller? And do we want to bring in Mr. Stronowski for any questions?
I don't have any questions.
I have none.
Okay. I think this was well explained, Mr. Haller, so I don't have any questions either. Mr. Brown?
I don't have any questions, but just one point. Mr. Haller references Mid-Atlantic Builders Incorporated, which I think it was important for him to disclose that. But for the record, Mid-Atlantic Builders merged with BHC Incorporated in 2018. So technically, the applicant, as noted on the staff report, is BHC Incorporated. Mid-Atlantic Builders, as far as I understand, really does not exist. But Mr. Haller, you're absolutely correct. They are one and the same today, but BHC, Incorporated is the applicant, not Mid-Atlantic Builders Incorporated, which merged.
That is correct. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Brown, for clarifying that.
And then one other issue, I had requested that the architectural illustrations that you referenced, Mr. Haller, that were part of the examiner hearing be available to the board. I don't know if they want to review those, even though they are nothing more than illustrations, just to have an idea of what this product may look like when it comes time to the SDP.
I appreciate that, Mr. Brown. I can't speak for my fellow commissioners. From my perspective, I think it'll be more pertinent when it comes to course of the SDP. But I'm certainly curious about this new product, and I imagine we'll have lots of questions at that time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. No other questions from commissioners or Mr. Brown. We've heard from, there's no one else who signed up to speak on this. We have heard from staff. We've heard from the applicant. I will close the public hearing piece with nobody to speak and deliberation or a motion. If there's no deliberation, commissioners, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, based on staff's evaluation and analysis, I move that the planning board adopt the findings of staff as revised by staff exhibit number 1, as well as the conditions set forth in staff report as modified applicants exhibit number 2, and that we approve CDP-0303-01 and type 1 tree conservation plan TCP 1-017-04-03.
Second, and you did include the revised findings, I think, right? Okay.
Staff
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Giraldo, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller and your team. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Much appreciated. And Mr. Brown, good to see you again. Okay, we're now moving on to item 5 on our agenda. This is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22058 Hargrove Industrial. Mr. Haller is representing the applicant. And we have Mr. Heath who will give the staff presentation. This also is an evidentiary hearing, so I will be requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. I believe as with the previous case, I don't think we have anyone that we will be needing to swear in, but if it happens at the time, we'll swear them in at that time. And I will turn to Mr. Heath for the staff presentation.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine, Mr. Heath. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 5 is a preliminary plan of subdivision for 4-22058 Hargrove Industrial, which proposes 2 parcels for the development of 389,028 square feet of industrial use, 297,885 square feet of which is existing. This application is supported by and subject to Certificate of Adequacy ADQ-2022-065, which was approved on June 16th, 2023, and meets all requirements of approval, in accordance with the subdivision regulations. All information regarding the preliminary plan of subdivision has been stated in the staff report, and staff is recommending approval with conditions. The applicant submitted proposed revisions to conditions prior to the Tuesday 12 p.m. deadline, and these revisions can be found in the additional backup as applicant's Exhibit 1, and staff is in full agreement with these revisions. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
I have none.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, then we'll turn to Mr. Haller.
Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Heller on behalf of the applicant. This is a fairly straightforward application. Staff noted this property is proposed for additional industrial development. The property, the board members will be familiar with, it was the former Volkswagen headquarters and then ultimately acquired by Hargrove. And back in 2004, the site was approved for additional industrial development, all of which has now occurred with the exception of one parcel, which is in the southeast corner of the larger Hargrove site. And in laying out the building for this development, we needed to adjust the lot lines between the existing parcel F, which is the parcel at the southeast corner, and the abutting parcel D, which has the old Hargrove offices and warehouse on them. And so the purpose of this subdivision is to adjust that lot line and to allow for the development of one final building on this overall property assemblage. As staff noted, there are some minor revisions to the conditions which were submitted, and we are otherwise in full agreement with staff recommendation and their findings, and agree with staff recommendations as revised in the conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant?
I have none.
No questions.
We have no one signed up to speak. I'll close the public hearing portion of this. Any under deliberation? If there's no deliberation, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move, based on staff's evaluation and analysis, I move that the planning board adopt the findings of staff and the conditions as modified by applicant's exhibit number 1 and approve preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22058, approval of the type 1 tree conservation plan, and approval of the variation from section 24-228.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Geraldo, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion on the motion. Seeing no discussion, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Geraldo.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller, and Mr. Heath. Thank you. Good work as always.
Thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have item 6 on our agenda. This is a preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22048 Swan Crossing. This is a request for continuance to 7/27. There are no issues or opposition that I'm aware of. Mr. Foreman is representing the applicant. We have Mr. Heath again. This is a evidentiary hearing. I won't be swearing anyone in unless we have the need to. I'll turn it over to Mr. Heath.
Yes, good morning again. For the record, Antoine Heath with the subdivision section. Item 6 is preliminary plan of subdivision 4-22048 Swan Crossing, which proposes 58 lots and 6 parcels for the development of 58 single-family detached dwellings, one of which is existing. By letter dated June 16, 2023, the applicant's representative requested a continuance to the planning board date of July 27, 2023, to allow additional time for the applicant to submit revised information regarding environmental impacts, and staff recommends approval of the continuance request. If the application is continued to July 27, 2023, no additional posting will be required. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heath. Commissioners, questions for staff?
No questions.
Mr. Foreman, anything you want to add?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. For the record, Nathaniel Foreman on behalf of the applicant. There is nothing additional we would like to add. We look forward to being before you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. There's no one else who signed up to speak on this. request for continuance. So I would look for a motion.
Mr.
Motion
Chair.
to approve. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ms. Vice Chair.
Motion to approve request for continuance to July 27th, 2023.
I'll second that.
Motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Geraldo. Discussion. Call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
How about I as well? The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Foreman, and thanks again, Mr. Heath. Next item on our agenda is item 7. This is Community Planning Division, Priority Funding Area Designation. We have staff members, Mr. Phelps and Ms. Linda Ramirez Blust. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. And I'll turn it over to staff for a presentation. We can't hear you, Linda. Try again. No.
Hello, Mr. Chairman.
Great.
There
Great.
we go. Okay, thank you. It's Blust, and no worries. When I got married, they pronounced our last name wrong as well. So
At the actual wedding, you're saying.
actual wedding ceremony. So no worries. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, this is Linda Ramirez Blust with the Master Plans and Studies section of the Community Planning Division. I'm joined by Tony Feltz, Division Chief for the Community Planning Division. Item number 7 on the agenda is a request to approve correspondence to the County Executive and County Council Chair, requesting they sign a joint letter to the Maryland Department of Planning for amendment of the state priority funding area to include 2 school sites, a park and ride facility, and adjacent rights of way in Brandywine. Next slide, please. Sorry.
Yeah, we got it.
Oh, you got it. Okay, wonderful. A brief overview of the process to amend the PFA. In this situation, Prince George's County Public Schools, in partnership with the State Interagency Commission and Maryland Stadium Authority, proposed construction of a new K-8 school facility at the current site of the Gwynn Park Middle School. The Maryland Department of Planning recommended PGCPS request the site be added to the priority funding area to secure state funding for design, construction, and ongoing maintenance of the new school. The Planning Department received the request from PGCPS and found that the site meets the criteria for PFA designation and is consistent with Plan 2035 strategies, goals, and policies. During our review, we identified additional properties for designation. The amendment to the PFA is made via a joint letter from the County Executive and the County Council Chair to MDP. Chair Shapiro will sign a letter on behalf of the Planning Board requesting the County Executive and Council Chair sign the joint letter, and drafts of each letter were included in the backup materials. Next slide, please. As background, what is a priority funding area? First, it is legislation enacted in 1997 to direct state spending to areas targeted for growth. PFAs are existing communities and places designated by local governments, indicating where they want state investment to support future growth. PFA designation provides access to state funding, including water and sewer infrastructure, transportation facilities, housing, business development tax credits, and neighborhood revitalization. And finally, it encourages state and local government coordination. As you see on the map to the left, the current PFA is within the county's growth boundary and supports the intention depicted in the Plan 2035 growth policy map. Further amendments to the PFA are carefully considered to maintain targeted investment of limited state and county resources. I'd like to draw your attention to the green box in the lower center of the map near Brandywine to zoom in. Next slide, please. The PFA designation request includes the parcels that comprise Gwynn Park Middle School in the top center of the map, which is to be replaced with a new K-8 school. The parcels that comprise Gwynn Park High School, which is towards more of the center of the map, adjacent to the existing PFA limit. The high school is earmarked in the PGCPS CIP for modernization or replacement in the near future. and the Brandywine Park and Ride, which is in the upper left of the map, to facilitate future projects associated with the development of the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit System, and the adjacent roadways to facilitate bicycle, pedestrian transit, and other improvements to connect schools to neighboring communities. Next slide, please. If we zoom out, you'll see the full extent of the amendment to the PFA. The mint green area is the existing PFA. The peach area indicates the proposed addition to the priority funding area. If you approve this request, letters signed by Chair Shapiro will be sent to the county executive and council chair requesting they sign a joint letter to MDP. The signed joint letter will be transmitted with the related documentation to MDP for review. MDP will review for compliance with the PFA designation criteria. If it determines that the PFA satisfies the criteria, they will send a PFA concurrence letter within 30 days. If they determine that the designated PFA does not meet the criteria for designation, then they will classify the PFA as a PFA comment area on the MDP PFA map. This classification communicates that the area has been designated locally, but that as determined by the MDP, it does not meet one or more PFA requirements. Next slide, please. And so staff request approval to send correspondence to the county executive and county chair requesting they sign a joint letter to MDP for amendment of the state priority funding area to include 2 school sites, a park and ride facility, and adjacent rights of way. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez-Blust. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Just out of curiosity, do we know whether or not, once this has been signed, if it's signed by all parties, how long does it generally take for Maryland Department of Planning to review or respond in any way?
It is my understanding that within 30 days of receipt, they will respond. Because MDP encouraged PGCPS to seek this PFA, they are aware of it. And so I imagine that they will be on the lookout and make sure it gets done, it gets addressed quickly, because the schools do have a deadline next year in order to get all of their agreements in order so that they can secure funding in time for construction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? Okay. First of all, let me just say thank you for the excellent presentation. Crystal clear. If there's no questions, then I would look for a motion.
Motion to approve and submit. Let's say I've lost the directions. Approval and submit to send to the county executive and county council.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Good to see you. And thanks again, Mr. Ramirez-Blust. Job well done. We have one more item on our agenda, item 8. This is an extension request for preliminary plan 4-19006 Clinton Marketplace North. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell will give a brief staff presentation, and Mr. Tedesco is representing the applicant. Turn to Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Take it away.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, I am Eddie Diaz-Campbell with the subdivision section. Item number 8 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-19006, Clinton Marketplace North. This preliminary plan of subdivision approved 136 lots and 48 parcels for development of 232 single-family detached dwelling units and 19,178 square feet of commercial development. The preliminary plan was approved by the planning board on July 22, 2021, and is valid through September 9, 2023. By letter dated June 13, 2023, the applicant requested a 2-year extension of the plan's approval. This is the applicant's first extension request. If this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through September 9, 2025. Staff has provided a memorandum which evaluates the extension request or its conformance to the required criteria for approval of an extension, which are contained within the prior subdivision regulations, and staff recommends approval of the extension request. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Commissioners, questions for staff?
I have
No.
none.
No
No
questions. Tedesco, take it away.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. For the record, Matthew Tedesco on behalf of the owner and applicant. Also with me this morning is Nat Ballard with Rogers Consulting. We submitted a very detailed letter dated June 13th in support of this request. Staff's analysis of that letter is memorialized in your staff report. We certainly appreciate Mr. Diaz-Campbell's and the subdivision section's review and recommendations. We would submit on our June 13th letter, providing great detail with respect to the basis for this extension request, and would respectfully request the board's approval of the 2-year extension.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Any questions for the applicant, Mr. Tedesco, Mr. Ballard?
No
I have
question.
none.
If there's no questions, then commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Move the approval of a 2-year extension request.
For the preliminary plan. Yep.
Yeah.
Second.
Yes. For item number 8, the preliminary plan of subdivision.
4-19006. I second it.
We've got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Geraldo. Discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Geraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco, Mr. Ballard. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. And I believe that concludes
Yeah,
our
Mr.
business for
Geraldo.
today. Mr. Hunt? You're on mute. We can't conclude. There's no further business before us. I want to thank everyone for their time today. Commissioners, unless there's any objection, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
No objection.
None.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.